begin this hour with the story of a 23-year-old young woman from Bridgeport, Connecticut, who died. She was healthy, but then was found dead.
No one is going to discard Lauren Smithfield's my daughter as you.
In December 2021, a 23-year-old young woman from Bridgeport, Connecticut, was found dead in her apartment, surrounded by many unanswered questions. Her name was Lauren Smith Fields. What began as a date with a 37-year-old man she met on a dating app quickly turned into a situation that would change her family's life forever. The circumstances of her death raised concerns, and it was clear something wasn't adding up. Lauren's family, devastated by the loss, immediately began questioning the investigation. They weren't willing to let this tragedy fade into the background. They knew their daughter, sister, and friend was not someone who would live carelessly, so how could her death have been so easily dismissed? The investigation showed troubling signs of neglect, and their search for the truth has become a fight for justice that refuses to be ignored. But before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank you, my incredible viewers and subscribers. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments don't just support this channel, they help keep these stories alive. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and become part of this growing community, one that believes every story deserves to be told and no victim should ever be forgotten. Now, let's get into it. Lauren Smith Fields was born on January 23, 1998, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, to Chantel Fields and Everett Smith. From the very beginning, Lauren stood out. She wasn't just smart, she had an infectious personality that made people gravitate toward her. Known for her determination, Lauren excelled in nearly everything she put her mind to. But what truly set her apart was the love she received from her family, especially from her three brothers, Kyle, Lem, and Tavar. They were a close-knit family, always supporting each other through thick and thin. It was clear from the start, Lauren was going to make her mark on the world, and her family was right there with her, every step of the way. Lauren wasn't just a standout in her family, she was also a standout at school. She was the type of student who got the job done, excelling in her studies with ease. At Still Meadow Elementary and Ripham Middle School, she made lifelong friends and impressed her teachers. Her natural ability to connect with people and her academic prowess made her someone others looked up to. By high school, Lauren was already making waves. She became a member of the National Honor Society, a testament to her hard work and dedication. At the same time, she joined the Black Student Union, driven by a desire to learn more about her heritage and connect with her culture. But it wasn't just about school for Lauren. It was about finding her place in the world and carving out a future that mattered.
I'm literally sweating, and I'm not doing anything.
Lauren's zest for life didn't stop at academics. She had a deep love for adventure, and her passion for travel quickly became one of the defining features of her life. Whether it was exploring the streets of London or discovering hidden gems in new countries, Lauren was always on the move, soaking in the world around her. Her Instagram feed was a testament to her travels, full of vibrant snapshots from places that seemed to tell a story of their own. But Lauren wasn't just visiting places, she was experiencing them. Every trip was an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to live in the moment. It was a life full of possibilities, and Lauren embraced it all with open arms. Beyond travel, Lauren also had a flair for fashion. Her Instagram was a curated collection of the things she loved most: stunning outfits, exotic destinations, and moments of pure joy. She wasn't afraid to express herself, to showcase her personality through what she wore. But it wasn't just about keeping up with trends. It was about feeling confident and enjoying life's little luxuries. Lauren embraced a lifestyle that many admired, one full of excitement, style, and self-expression. She wasn't just living for the sake of it, she was living with purpose, curating every moment to reflect her vibrant spirit. By 2021, Lauren was 23 years old and ready for the next chapter of her life. She decided to give online dating a try. Like so many young adults looking for love or new connections, she created a profile on Bumble, a popular dating app where users match based on mutual interests. It seemed like a fun, harmless way to meet new people, especially for someone like Lauren, who craved adventure and new experiences. Little did she know, this decision would lead her into a series of events that no one could have predicted. The man she met that evening would become the last person to see her alive, and his actions would raise more questions than answers. This was the start of a new chapter for Lauren, but it would be a chapter she would never get to finish. Sometime in early December 2021, she matched with Matthew LaFountain, a 37-year-old man from Bridgeport. He was older than her by 14 years, but something about their conversation just clicked. They bonded over a shared love for travel, trying new foods, and spending time with family. Matthew, like Lauren, enjoyed adventure, and from their chats, he seemed charming, easy-going. For Lauren, who lived for experiences and exploring the world, it felt like a promising match. They messaged back and forth for a few days, getting to know each other. To her friends and family, Lauren was independent and confident. If she agreed to meet someone in person, it meant she felt comfortable enough to do so. What she didn't know was that this first date would be the last time she'd ever be seen alive. On December 8, 2021, Lauren and Matthew decided to take their connection offline. They made plans to meet just a few days later, on the evening of December 11th. Instead of going out, Lauren invited Matthew to her apartment. The plan was simple: a relaxed night in, just the two of them. Lauren asked Matthew to bring a bottle of tequila, and he agreed. Whether it was meant to be casual drinks or something more celebratory, no one can say for sure. When the evening came, everything seemed to be going smoothly. They drank shots, played games, ate snacks, settled in to watch a movie. It was the kind of first date that felt low-key, comfortable. There were no signs that anything would go wrong, at least not yet. At some point during the night, something changed. Lauren started feeling sick. She excused herself to the bathroom and vomited. It was sudden, unexpected. But after a while, she seemed to recover. She returned to the couch and continued watching the movie. But then, it happened again. She got up, went to the bathroom for a second time, staying in there for about 10 to 15 minutes. Matthew later said he thought it was strange, but he didn't ask her about it. After all, they had only just met. Maybe she was just feeling off. When Lauren came back, she didn't say much. She sat down, watched the movie, and not long after, she fell asleep on the couch. At this point, Matthew decided to move Lauren to her bed. According to his statement, he picked her up, carried her into her room, and laid her down. Then he got into bed next to her. He later insisted that nothing happened between them, that he was fully clothed, and that they hadn't engaged in any kind of sexual activity. But this detail, like many others in his account, raised more questions than answers. If Lauren was feeling unwell, why not let her rest on the couch? Why move her to bed and stay there with her, especially when they had just met? Hours passed. At around 3 a.m., Matthew woke up to use the bathroom. He glanced over at Lauren and said he heard her snoring, a sign that she was still breathing. After that, he went back to sleep. It seemed like just another ordinary night, but when the sun rose, nothing was the same. At 6:30 a.m., Matthew woke up again. This time, something was different. Lauren wasn't moving. She was lying still in bed, completely unresponsive. Then he noticed something else. There was coming from her right nostril. He later told police that he panicked and immediately called 911. While on the phone with emergency responders, he was instructed to perform CPR, but it was too late. By the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. Lauren was gone. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Just like that, a bright young woman with her entire future ahead of her was no longer alive. And the events of that night, the drinks, the sudden illness, the hours leading up to her final moments, became pieces of a puzzle that her family would spend years trying to put together. But instead of getting answers, they were met with silence, contradictions, and a case that, from the very beginning, didn't seem to be taken seriously. The morning Lauren Smith Fields was found unresponsive, Bridgeport police arrived at her apartment and began their standard protocol. At least, that's what they claimed. Matthew LaFountain was the last person to see Lauren alive, and by default, he should have been questioned thoroughly. But from the very start, things didn't go as expected.
The I team obtained this police report of the response to a 911 call from Lauren's apartment on the morning of December 12th from a white male identified as Matthew LaFountain. The investigator notes he was trembling and visibly shaken. LaFountain said they met on the dating site Bumble, began drinking shots of tequila, and Lauren became ill. That later they played some games, ate some food, and started to watch a movie. He says he carried her to her bedroom and laid her in her bed. He then laid down next to her and fell asleep. He woke up again at approximately 0630 hours, and she was laying on her right side. Blood was coming out of her right nostril onto the bed, and she...
According to the police report, Matthew was visibly shaken. He described the events of the previous night, saying Lauren had been drinking tequila, suddenly became sick, and later fell asleep. He claimed he moved her to bed, lay beside her, and woke up to find her unresponsive. When asked about their interactions, Matthew was quick to clarify that they did not have sex, and that he had remained fully clothed the entire time. He repeatedly emphasized that their night together was entirely innocent. Under normal circumstances, when someone is the last known person to be with someone who dies under unusual circumstances, they are at the very least questioned extensively. But in this case, police seemed satisfied with Matthew's version of events almost immediately. No deep interrogation, no immediate drug tests, no pressure for a more detailed account of the hours leading up to Lauren's final moments. Even more concerning, Matthew wasn't considered a suspect, not even a person of interest. Instead, police described him as a nice guy and appeared to take him at his word. But was that enough? Was his version of the story really the full truth? Or were there critical details left unexplored? As the investigation into Lauren's passing continued, her body was sent for an autopsy. The results would be crucial in determining what happened that night. When the findings were released, they shocked everyone. The medical examiner ruled that Lauren had died from an accidental overdose. Her system contained a mix of alcohol and these substances, especially in combination, can be lethal. But immediately, Lauren's family questioned the findings. This didn't make sense to them. Lauren wasn't someone who used. She rarely drank. She was active, health conscious, and focused on her future. For her loved ones, the idea that she had somehow taken such a dangerous mix of substances on her own was not just hard to believe, it was completely out of character. And there was another question. How did these substances get into her system? If Lauren wasn't known to use them, did she ingest them willingly, or was something else at play? Her family demanded more answers. The explanation given to them didn't add up, and the way the case was handled only made their suspicions grow. If losing Lauren wasn't painful enough, the way her family found out about her passing only made it worse. After calling and texting Lauren for hours with no response, her mother and brother decided to visit her apartment. They expected to knock on the door and find her inside. Instead, they found something chilling. A note taped to her door. It read, "If you're looking for Lauren, call this number." It wasn't from the police. It wasn't from an investigator. It was from her landlord. When they dialed the number, they weren't connected to an officer explaining the situation. Instead, they were told, in the most impersonal way, that Lauren had passed away. Not a single person from the police department had reached out to notify them. No officer had taken the time to deliver the news with care. For nearly 2 full days, Lauren's family had been left in the dark, unaware that their daughter, their sister, was no longer alive. The moment they realized what had happened, grief turned into confusion, and then into outrage. How could law enforcement handle something so delicate with such little care? Why had they not been informed immediately? Why had they been left to discover Lauren's passing like this? It was a moment that would stay with them forever. But the more they uncovered about how the investigation was handled, the worse it got. When Lauren's family finally got access to her apartment, they weren't just stepping into a place filled with memories. They were stepping into what should have been an active crime scene. But what they found was disturbing.
Bloodstain on the bed.
The family says they provided evidence they'd collected to crime scene investigators who arrived for the first time that day, included a sheet and a pill.
And 2 cups of like drinks or whatever next to a bottle. They didn't take none of that. We seen a condom, we seen lube, other stuff in there. They didn't take none of it.
The police had been there. They had examined the apartment. And yet, when Lauren's family looked around, they saw crucial pieces of evidence that had been ignored. Sheet, 2 cups sitting next to a bottle, a used condom in the bathroom trash can, a loose pill found on the floor. None of it had been collected. None of it had been documented. It was as if investigators had come in, taken a quick glance, and walked out, deciding there was no need for further examination. But why? Why hadn't they processed the scene thoroughly? Why weren't those items tested for anything suspicious? Lauren's family stood in that apartment, staring at the evidence right in front of them, and realized something devastating. If they hadn't come in to collect these things themselves, they would have never been acknowledged. It was more than just a lack of action. It was a complete disregard for the basic steps of an investigation. And as days passed, it became increasingly clear that if Lauren's family wanted justice, they couldn't rely on the authorities. They would have to fight for it themselves. Lauren's family didn't just mourn her loss, they fought for her. From the moment they learned about her passing, they knew something wasn't right. The way they were notified, the gaps in the investigation, The lack of urgency from the authorities. It only deepened their suspicions.
Justice.
Without a doubt, we know that my daughter was not a drug user, and I had a second autopsy myself, paid out of pocket, because we felt so uncomfortable with the way it was.
Her mother, father, and brothers refused to accept the idea that Lauren's death was just an accident, with no further questions. They needed answers. They needed closure. But instead of cooperation from the police, they were met with silence. No updates, no clear explanations, no efforts to hold anyone accountable. So, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Lauren's family spoke out, first to their community, then to the public. They started sharing their frustrations online, exposing the failures in the investigation. They demanded that the case be reopened, that the evidence be properly examined, that the authorities take Lauren's death seriously. But they knew words alone wouldn't be enough. Determined to get a clearer picture of what really happened to Lauren, they made a difficult decision, ordering a second autopsy. Unlike the official report, which had already ruled her death an accident, this one wouldn't be conducted by authorities they no longer trusted. It would be done independently, paid for out of pocket, through donations and the support of their community. Because for Lauren's family, the truth mattered more than anything. Lauren's family knew they needed help. So they hired attorney Darnell Crosland, who quickly began digging into the case.
Court to be treated fairly and equally under the law. That didn't happen here, and everyone listening to the story needs to know that Lauren Smith Fields wasn't given the treatment that she should have been given.
Crosland publicly called out the Bridgeport Police Department for failing to preserve evidence, failing to collect samples beyond the autopsy, and failing to interview key individuals beyond the brief conversation with Matthew LaFountain. Even more disturbing, Crosland pointed out that if Lauren had been a young white woman from a wealthy neighborhood, authorities would have acted immediately. He said, "We see how cases involving white women get national coverage, immediate police response, and full forensic investigations. But in Lauren's case, the police dismissed it before the family even had a chance to ask questions." His statement echoed the concerns of many. Was this another case of racial disparity in policing? As the pressure mounted, the family refused to let Lauren's case get swept under the rug. As Lauren's family continued their fight, people began to take notice. What started as a local tragedy soon became a national conversation. Social media played a huge role in amplifying their voices. Platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok were flooded with posts about Lauren, questioning the investigation and calling for justice. People were outraged. They couldn't understand how a young woman had died under such mysterious circumstances. Yet authorities seemed uninterested in getting to the bottom of it. The movement caught the attention of major celebrities, and one of the most vocal supporters was Cardi B. Cardi B used her platform to call out the way the case was being handled. She pointed out the discrepancies, the lack of urgency, and how quickly the investigation had been closed, without a second thought. On January 23, 2022, she tweeted, "Nah, this man don't look old, and it's not old at all, and yet the media made it seem like she was with a old-ass man looking to trick on her. I'm disgusted on how they spin the narrative, especially because I see people saying online, that's what she gets." She followed up with another tweet, demanding justice. "This is so scary. A fictional murderer character, but in real life. Justice for Lauren. Connecticut, you have failed that young lady." She wasn't alone. More public figures began to speak out. News outlets started covering Lauren's story. The pressure on the Bridgeport Police Department intensified. With so many eyes on them, authorities could no longer ignore the case. Something had to change. The push for justice became impossible to silence. Under growing pressure from the public, city officials, and national media, the Bridgeport Police Department had no choice but to reopen the investigation. The mayor of Bridgeport publicly addressed the issue, acknowledging the failures in the way Lauren's case was handled. He issued an apology to the Smithfields family and the community.
Developing tonight, 2 detectives suspended for their handling of the investigation into the death of Lauren Smith Fields. She's the college student from Bridgeport, Connecticut, who died after going on a date with someone she met on a dating app. For weeks, her family has questioned how the department has handled her investigation. And tonight, the mayor is blasting the probe and putting 2 officers on leave. And there are new questions about another woman who died under similar circumstances. News 4's Anjali Hemphill is in the newsroom with the major new developments tonight.
Tonight, the Bridgeport mayor made a public apology to the 2 victims' families and said both cases have now been reassigned to other members of the police department.
Once again, express my condolences to the families of Lauren Smithfields and of Brendan Lee Rawls. And I want you to know that I am extremely disappointed with the leadership of the Bridgeport Police Department and have found the actions taken up to this point with regards to these 2 investigations unacceptable. After viewing these matters even more closely, and in the absence of the police chief, I've directed the deputy chief, Chief Baraha, to immediately put on administrative leave the 2 officers who are the subject of the Bridgeport Police Internal Affairs investigation for lack of sensitivity to the public, for failure to follow police policy in the handling of these 2 matters. So to be clear, effective immediately, both Detective Lanos and Detective Cronin are suspended from duties and put on administrative leave until such time as the Office of OIA has finished their investigation and disciplinary cases have been completed. In addition, the supervising officer who was in charge of overseeing these matters has retired from the department this past Friday.
The community, family, and friends still wanted to know what happened that night, and so set up public marches and demonstrations.
But an apology wasn't enough. To show accountability, the mayor announced that 2 detectives who had initially been assigned to Lauren's case were being suspended. The very detectives who had failed to notify the family, who had dismissed crucial evidence, and who had shown little interest in investigating further, were now facing consequences. This was a step in the right direction. But for Lauren's family, it was only the beginning. They didn't just want individuals held accountable. They wanted systemic change. The Smithfields family knew that what happened to them should never happen to anyone else. Losing Lauren was already devastating. But the way they were treated in the aftermath, the lack of notification, the disregard for their concerns, the complete failure of the system was unacceptable. So, they turned their grief into action. With the help of their legal team and supporters, they began pushing for a new law, a law that would prevent other families from experiencing what they had gone through. They called it Lauren's Law. This law would require law enforcement agencies to notify the family of a deceased person within 24 hours of identifying them. It was a basic measure, something that should have already been standard practice. But as Lauren's case had proven, it wasn't. Their fight wasn't just about Lauren anymore. It was about every family who had ever been left in the dark, every case that had been brushed aside, every person who deserved better from the justice system. Lauren's Law was their way of making sure her story led to real change. And with the momentum behind them, they weren't going to stop until it became reality. As the weeks passed and frustration grew, Lauren Smithfield's family and supporters took to the streets, demanding accountability from the Bridgeport Police Department. On January 23, 2022, what would have been Lauren's 24th birthday, hundreds of people gathered outside Bridgeport Police Headquarters, calling for justice.
March in Bridgeport.
Couple weeks, many have called the investigation into the cause of death of Lauren Smithfield as mishandled and unprofessional. Demonstrators gathered to demand further action by city officials as well as justice for Lauren on what would have been her 24th birthday. Jorge was there.
On January 23, 2022, a group of more than 300 people gathered outside of Bridgeport Police Headquarters to demand justice for Lauren Smithfield, as they believe the investigation into Lauren's death left several unanswered questions. One of the questions? Well, Lauren's family says Bridgeport police didn't consider the man that last saw her alive as a suspect because they say police told them he seemed like a nice guy.
If his family didn't want to serve in the police department, would he be a nice guy? We're gonna make him famous too. We're gonna make the nice guy famous.
Lauren was reported deceased in her Bridgeport apartment by the man she met 3 days earlier on a dating app. Along with concerns on how the man allegedly was left unquestioned, Lauren's family is also calling out the Bridgeport Police Department due to unprofessionalism they experienced, as they were not notified of Lauren's death until 2 days later. So, on what would have been her 24th birthday, the group of family, friends, and supporters began to walk from the Bridgeport Police Headquarters.
Lauren's family had organized a march, and the turnout was overwhelming. Protesters carried signs with messages like "Justice for Lauren" and "Bridgeport Police failed Lauren." They chanted her name, refusing to let her story fade into silence. Many were outraged, not just by her untimely death, but by the way authorities had dismissed the case early on. Lauren's brother, Lem Jeter, took a megaphone and spoke directly to the crowd. "We will not stop until we get answers. We will not let them sweep my sister's death under the rug." The march moved from the police headquarters to the Margaret Morton Government Center, where speakers demanded an independent investigation into the case. The crowd included local activists, family friends, and strangers who had been moved by Lauren's story. That same day, her family chose to celebrate Lauren's life in a way that reflected who she was: joyful, vibrant, and full of love. At Seaside Park in Bridgeport, they gathered for a memorial balloon release. Pink and white balloons floated into the sky as family members shared heartfelt messages about Lauren. Her mother, Chantel Fields, held back tears as she addressed those who had come to honor her daughter. Lauren was the light of our lives. She was kind, intelligent, and full of dreams. We will not stop fighting for her. She deserved better. People lit candles, played Lauren's favorite songs, and shared memories. Some wrote messages on the balloons before releasing them, letting Lauren's spirit be carried with the wind. The event was a powerful reminder that despite the pain, Lauren's name would not be forgotten. Her family vowed to continue fighting for justice, ensuring that no other family would have to endure the same devastating loss without answers. And that concludes the story of Lauren Smithfields, a case filled with unanswered questions, a family's relentless fight for justice, and a system that seemed all too willing to look the other way. What do you think? Was this truly an accident, or was something more at play? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this made you think, there are more stories on the channel that highlight similar injustices. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video, because keeping these cases in the spotlight is the first step toward change. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.